Well, hello, Angelique. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I just want to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be a school board member.
Yeah, so I'm a mom. I have a son who's a fifth grader at MAS. Education is always been something that I've been very passionate about. It's very important to me. It's made a difference having educators and teachers who cared about me and took an interest in my development and growth. It's made such a huge difference in my life and my educational opportunities and career opportunities. I'm a first generation college grad and law grad. And I wouldn't be where I am right now if I hadn't had those opportunities and people who cared and took an interest in me. I was in the military, but my father was in the military. So sometimes when I talk about and say I have a military background, but
Mhm.
I grew up in military communities. We moved around a lot. And so I went to schools all over the country as well as overseas. So I had an opportunity to see what different public school educations can look like and what kind of influence they can actually have over a student's life. I moved to Texas when I was in the 10th grade. I had been in Germany before that. And it was a little bit of a difference. I knew, like I said, first generation college college grad. So education was important in our household. I had to go to college. I don't think I had a choice in that matter, but I didn't know necessarily how to do that, but make good grades, right? I didn't know what steps to take. And I went to undergrad at the University of North Texas, and I was fortunate enough to have educators, professors, and admin who really took an interest in me, joined the honors program, had sort of a guide and path of how to get to law school, which, having had that experience compared to my high school experience, it did sort of shape, at least made me aware. I think I became aware at some point as to how important that really is to help you get to that next step, having transparency about how to take the LSAT and that sort of thing. So I went to law school, SUNY State University. At the time, I was really focused on public service. But I went the private law firm route, and I joined a law firm in the litigation practice, one of the top global firms in the world, and spent about 9 years there. While I was there, I still did pro bono, public service work, and a lot of it was focused on mentoring high school students. I think educating our youth is key. It's important. It's a way to really ensure that everyone has fair opportunities in life, and has access to career opportunities that they wish for themselves. So I led every summer an internship program with ninth grade students. They were in their eighth grade year going to ninth grade. I mentored my mentees who were applying to colleges, and helping them in that process and moot courting, mock trialing with them, and really getting them ready for sort of college preparedness, and helping them excel. And so that just speaks to what my focus was when it came to pro bono work and volunteering work. I left legal practice to go into the financial services industry in the compliance space. And I've been there for almost 10 years now. So I have a legal and compliance background. I do think that those qualities are helpful for a board member. On the compliance space, we set policy, ensuring policy meets certain requirements. In setting policy, you have to listen to your key stakeholders and ensuring that you're implementing policy that makes sense and is achievable and takes into account the requirements and what's important to stakeholders across the board. What's also key in compliance is ensuring that policy is being adhered to, that you actually have oversight, which is important as a board member as well. You want to make sure that the policy that you're implementing or that they're implementing, that there's oversight and accountability, and ensuring that the policy needs that are met and requirements that are met are actually being implemented, and then meeting the goals of the community. So why am I running? As I said, I have a son who's in MAS. So not only is education important to me, generally in the sense, the broader sort of sense of community at large, but personally for my child who's in the district, I'm also personally invested in ensuring that all of our students are supported. We've had a wonderful time at MAS. We've had a really good experience. He's had great teachers. I want to ensure all families feel as supportive as we have, and have the same sort of resource and support as we've had. And that's important to me. So, I'm personally invested in ensuring that all of our students in all of our schools have access to a quality education. And that's why I'm running.
Okay, so I'm representing CURE, which stands for the Coalition for Understanding Racism Through Education. And our mission is to expand education around systemic racism and inequity. How do you think that our district can expand that education? And how will you as a board member lead to bring together differing opinions in our district about the importance of equity, cultural consciousness, and racially literate education?
So this is, with respect to the district and ensuring that we're bringing people together, differing views. It's one of my platforms. It's key of one of my priorities is ensuring that we have community engagement. We're optimizing community engagement, and having these type of discussions and bringing people together. It's really important that as a board, we're building trust within the community. We want to what I would do if I were so lucky enough to be elected is engaging with the community and ensuring that we're listening to the community and learning from them. And that would be the board as well, and creating those opportunities. Everyone has differing viewpoints and opinions based upon their own experiences and backgrounds, but the key is really listening to those differing views. We're all neighbors and we're all in this community together. And one of the most important things in having these discussions and ensuring that people with differing views are um, hearing us is that we're actually engaging in the community and building that trust. And one of the ways I think it's really important in doing that is engaging with communities, organizations like CURE and like CRC. Having, when I'm talking about engaging with the community, is that we're actually having town halls and meetings where we're engaging with community organizations where maybe there could be help in facilitating some of those discussions about highlighting those needs and why it's important, especially when it comes to the administration and other board members in the community at large. I think at the end of the day, we are stronger together, but to be stronger together, we have to take into account the needs of all of the community. And we all care about ensuring that all of our students, across the board in all of our schools actually are receiving an education and a quality education. And really, at the end of the day, focusing on that when we're talking about the need for expanding education in this area, because that's the end goal, because it improves the quality of education for all of our students. And I think sometimes that gets lost in some of these discussions.
So can you speak to what you believe are some of the issues around equity and access here in Mamaroneck? And what do you believe are potential solutions for these challenges?
So, so in equity and ensuring resources for all of our students and all of our schools, one of the things that I think is key and important is ensuring that we're looking at the data and seeing how our students perform. I think is one way of really seeing how we're doing as far as access and education, and ensuring that all students across the board, are achieving in a way that we would expect across the board. And looking at some of the data that's been shared, that's not necessarily the case for all of our students. Like when you start stratifying the data and looking at, how our kids are doing in state tests for ELA and math, once you start breaking it down by, socioeconomic status, race, maybe looking at, potentially, or not potentially, but when you look at, second ESL speakers, so second language, English as a second language, you do see differences in how our students are performing. So when you see that happening and the data is showing that to you, what I would do is look at coming up with solutions to address that, and maybe looking at different ways, creative ways of doing so. But it is driven by looking at the data and where our students, looking at how and where they're performing. So one of the things that sort of anecdotally, but I do think is important when you look at literacy and how students are performing from an socioeconomic standpoint, different income levels, you do see that there are differences from a literacy perspective, and it starts very young. And so when you look at for like pre-K, early childhood educational, like it's a very simple um, area to look at. My son, we were lucky enough to be able to send him to the pre-K program at Central Ave. But my mom was here. And so we were able to do that for a couple hours of the day. I was lucky enough to have her move in and help out. But if she wouldn't have been here, we wouldn't have been able to take part in that program. The program is not, accessible for all families. If you're a working family, both parents, you can't, when you're looking at childcare and balancing that, it's not always accessible. So making sure like that's an area where when we're looking at equity and access, we can see that, there could be room for improvement. So again, it's policy setting based upon areas where we see that there are instances where all of our children may not have access across the board in the same way when you're looking at how they're performing. And then having actual measurable targets, goals in mind for what we would expect or like to see, and measuring up against that, having some real targets behind what we would like to see, where we would want to see improvement across the board. Obviously measurable steps, but when we're not seeing that year after year, we do want to take a look at other ways of addressing that.
Okay, so what would you do as a trustee to ensure that decisions made by the board are inclusive to the needs of all students and families?
So I think, again, the community outreach and organization, optimizing community outreach and working with community organizations across, Mamaroneck and Larchmont is key. I plan to have town hall meetings where we meet with different where we set up meetings in different neighborhoods, making them during times that are maybe easier for working parents to attend, having sessions where we're listening and hearing the parents and teachers and students concerns that they may have. Not everyone can get to a town hall meeting, but also sending out surveys where we are collecting information to get a sense of what's important to people and parents. And there, the engagement is really key. Like, it's hard to sometimes get information out there, but also, trying to relate to, why it's important to parents, where there's a lot going on, people who are busy, who may not necessarily be aware of how the board implements policy and how really important that is in shaping the education that our students are receiving.
So to that point, how would you incorporate voices that are often left out of decision-making in our community?
So, that's where, there's always this, when we're looking at being as inclusive as possible, that's where there's the concern that you're leaving out those voices that aren't always heard. And, we can organize the town halls, but we also need to understand like how we can reach those how we can reach those communities and populations better that don't always feel as included. So working with, community organizations to understand different parts of the community that may feel left out or aren't always engaged because they don't feel as if they belong. Trying to drum up, I don't know if excitement is the right, but like excitement and interest in what the board is doing, having board meetings taking place at different schools might be a way of drumming up that interest in different neighborhoods and getting people to come out and actually participate in the board meetings and hear what's going on. I think if the community, especially voices that don't always feel as if they're being included, are heard and see that interest being taken, and then we might be able to better have more engagement from those populations at board meetings, or in at least letting board members know how they feel about, what's important to them and what their concerns might be.
So please tell us how people can find out more about you.
Yes, to find out more about me and my campaign, you can go to Angelique for School Board at angeliqueforschoolboard.com, which is the website, which has the priorities listed as well, and more about me and myself and the campaign. There's also a Facebook page, Angelique for School Board. And if you type that in, it should come up on Facebook, and you could like and follow, and you'll learn more about upcoming events. And then if you want to reach out directly, there's also an email address, angeliqueforschoolboard@gmail.com, where you can reach out and learn more about, like, if you have a question and you want to reach out directly, feel free to do so.
So Angelique, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about yourself, or tell us about your goals that we haven't covered over these questions?
Yeah. So I think one more thing that's important and aligns with the community outreach and optimizing the engagement within the community is one of the things that has been, concerning, or that I've heard and myself have been concerned about it as a parent, is, how are students doing? How is my child doing? And questions around curriculum. And so one of my platforms that we haven't gotten to much detail about as part of the campaign, and we've been talking a lot about, is working with teachers and parents and students, but really getting input and feedback about coming up with best practices and tightening curriculum and what's being taught in science across the board at the different elementary schools, just to ensure there's some consistency and baseline setting about what our students are learning. Not teaching towards a test and standardization in any of that sort of way, but just ensuring that there's a baseline, that all of our students sort of have the same foundation when they're going on to that next milestone, whether it's going off to high school or middle school. I know there's been concerns raised about that in the area of science. So looking more into that and working with the community and teachers to address that concern.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for taking time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.